When we think of the summer of 1944, our minds almost automatically go to the beaches of Normandy. D-Day is widely remembered as the strike that broke the back of Nazi Germany. This chart shows a very different reality. In 1944, the combined Western Allies faced less than a quarter of the German military. The Soviet Union faced 75% of the German army, entirely on its own. On June 22nd, the Soviet Union launched Operation Bagration. In the space of just 3 weeks, this offensive annihilated an entire German army group and seized hundreds of kilometers of territory. To understand how the Nazi Empire was actually defeated, we have to look past the beaches of Normandy and examine the mechanics of the largest single military victory in human history. By the spring of 1944, the Soviets had built up a 2-to-1 numerical advantage across the Eastern Front. But throughout 1943, raw numbers alone hadn't been enough to destroy German forces intact. For this summer offensive, Joseph Stalin changed his leadership strategy. He backed away from his usual micromanagement and granted his generals the operational autonomy they needed to plan the attack themselves. Adolf Hitler was doing the opposite. Facing pressure on all sides, he demanded an absolutely rigid defense. He expressly forbade his understrength commanders from retreating, stripping them of their ability to adapt to a changing battlefield. This shift in leadership meant that a highly flexible Soviet military philosophy was now on a direct collision course with a fatally rigid German defense. The operation began with an elaborate illusion. The Soviets initiated a sophisticated camouflage and deception campaign known as Maskirovka to convince the Germans that the summer attack would strike further south, in Ukraine. They enforced strict radio silence across the central line, while civilian populations were evacuated to prevent leaks. Staff officers even flew over their own positions to ensure that camouflaged artillery and troop deployments were completely invisible from the air. This map shows the result. German intelligence took the bait. Anticipating a southern strike, they redeployed their most vital armored units away from Army Group Center to meet a threat that didn't exist yet. The statistical drain on the Central Front was devastating. Army Group Center lost a staggering 88% of its tanks and a third of its heavy artillery. By weaponizing information asymmetry, the Soviets blinded the German high command and hollowed out their defensive line before the first shot was fired. 140,000 Soviet partisans struck first, paralyzing the German rear across entire districts. On the night of June 19th, those partisans detonated 10,000 demolition charges along German-controlled railroads and bridges. This massive sabotage severed supply lines and forced the retreating Germans onto exposed, narrow roads. 3 days later, the Red Army launched a rolling double barrage. They hammered both the front defensive lines and the rear positions simultaneously, a level of destruction German accounts described as the most intense they had seen in the war. This graphic illustrates the core difference between the German Blitzkrieg doctrine and the new Soviet deep battle philosophy. Blitzkrieg relied heavily on a single tactical breakthrough to pierce enemy lines. Deep battle focused on multiple, synchronized breakthroughs across an operational level. By constantly shifting the point of attack, the Soviets caused the entire defensive structure to shatter. This multi-layered approach overloaded German communications. Against a rigid defense that wasn't allowed to retreat, deep battle made surviving the offensive mathematically impossible. With the German lines breached, Soviet mobile units and armored divisions poured through the newly created gaps. Upgraded T-34 tanks led the charge, easily withstanding the standard 50mm anti-tank guns the Germans used. Soviet commanders operated with a new level of flexibility, freely abandoning stalled attacks to rush their reserves toward the sections of the front where breakthroughs were already succeeding. To keep this offensive supplied over vast distances, the Red Army relied on the United States Lend-Lease program. The delivery of over 420,000 American trucks mechanized the Soviet forces, allowing them to advance continuously into the German rear. As they moved forward at speeds of 25 kilometers a day, the fast-moving Soviets reached Hitler's Festplätze, strategic stronghold cities ordered to fight to the last man. The Soviets simply drove around them. By bypassing these cities, the Red Army spared themselves the bloodbath of urban combat. The stranded German defenders were entirely cut off from their supply lines, rendering them useless to the wider war effort. The synthesis of deep battle tactics and mechanized logistics transformed standard battlefield victories into the wholesale geographic collapse of the German army. The final toll on Army Group Center was immense. Close to 30 divisions were wiped out, resulting in 450,000 killed, wounded, or captured German soldiers. To mark their victory, the Soviets marched 50,000 captured German soldiers through the main streets of Moscow in a single massive parade. But even this offensive had physical limits. After advancing over 700 kilometers at a blistering pace, the Soviet supply lines finally reached their breaking point near the Polish border. That logistical exhaustion had a brutal consequence. Soviet forces halted right outside Warsaw. As they rested, the German military crushed the Polish Home Army uprising inside the city, an outcome Stalin allowed to happen for his own post-war political priorities. Operation Bagration proved the power of the deep battle doctrine, but it also revealed the absolute limits of geography and the cold political calculus of its leaders. Despite its size, Bagration is rarely discussed in the West.
The cultural focus on D-Day, combined with decades of Cold War hostility, effectively buried the scale of Soviet contributions to the Allied victory, and yet its historical footprint is undeniable. The offensive physically tore open the road to Berlin, proving the devastating effectiveness of the Soviet Union's new way of war. Operation Bagration was the strategic blow that crippled the German military beyond repair and made the total defeat of Nazi Germany inevitable.